Hey guys, Buff and Gamebad today, bringing you a video, and today, on the eve of the Battlefield 2042 official launch, if you didn't have early access this week, we're going to go over my controller settings. Now, I'm taking a lot of these from TheTacticalBrit. I'll go ahead and link his channel down below. So he had a really good video going through things. I tweaked mine slightly, and I think there's some good points here as far as sensitivity to go through. Having the week on the game here with the early access launch of the game, I put about a solid weekend. I'm not sure how many hours, probably around 70 hours for this game. And just today, it really finalized my settings for the most part to where I like them. Definitely struggled a lot on the ground with infantry to begin with, and really kind of narrowed that in and fine-tuned it today. So hopefully this guide will help you out for infantry gameplay and especially for vehicle gameplay. The default mappings are definitely very difficult. Now, I'm on PS5, so this is obviously very applicable to all consoles, whether it's last gen or next gen here on Xbox as well. If you're on PC playing with a controller, obviously this works. Otherwise, mouse and keyboard, at least it'll give you a little bit of guidance as to where to go with your settings. So the one thing that I'll take away from this or let you know is, like I was saying, I really struggled on the ground with my gunplay, and it just didn't feel right. And by tweaking some of these sensitivity options and controls, I was able to finally get to a point where I'm able to control my recoil, get shots on target consistently at the right ranges, and make it feel a little bit more natural. Kind of like Battlefield 4. I have these set up so it feels a little bit slower pace like Battlefield 4 did. So jumping into the controller settings, and we'll touch a little bit on the sound here as well. But first off, for the, why don't we go over to the display to start. So for video, field of view, I have mine set up at 80. Again, I think default, it's around 50 or 40. Field of view up to 80 just obviously increases what you can see. So it's good to have this slider here on console. 80 to 90 sounds pretty good to me. I'm pretty comfortable at 80. I don't want to see too much because as you increase your field of view, it will also kind of make it feel like you're running very fast if you're seeing so much. So if you're not a fan of kind of that fast-paced, like Call of Duty Professional Warzone style gameplay, keep it on the lower end. I would say 80 to 90 is good. Anything above that, you're going to feel like you're zooming around the map, kind of like Sonic the Hedgehog or something. So we'll keep it at 80. Third person field of view. This is going to be for vehicles. This will be at 88. Now, ADS field of view, I'll turn that on, so magnification of weapon sights will be relative to your field of view that we've defined above. So that'll be helpful. You definitely want that turned on. Brightness, 50. All this I didn't touch. Motion blur, I did bring this down to 50. I believe it was set at 100, so we'll bring that down to 50. And then all these other ones, chromatic, film, vintage, lens, all that we're going to leave at the default, which is on. Next for HUD general, this stuff, I show HUD on, HUD motion on. We're going to leave those. Camera shake, bring that down all the way down to 50. That'll be a little bit easier so your camera explosions, things like that, isn't shaking all over the place, throw off your aim. Soldier compass always on. Show vehicle seat, all of these you can leave as default. World log, kill log, this is all default, so we didn't touch that. Crosshairs and minimap, didn't touch any of these, so we'll leave those. Over to sound, master volume, didn't touch any of this. Sound configuration, I left this at auto. For the audio mix, we'll do speakers, and then for the hit indicator 2042. So there's definitely speakers here, but also I actually thought I had this on war tapes. So we want war tapes for the audio mix. This is probably the best one on Battlefield. It gives you the best sound for gunfire and things like that. And then speaker configuration there will be on stereo. So you can also put this to surround. I'm using headphones, so we'll go ahead and do surround sound. So surround and war tapes. I think I actually put this back to default at one point, which is why it reset. And then subtitles, obviously, we'll leave off here. Text size, normal. Now to controller. So this is the important stuff. So soldier controls, default for all the controls, ground vehicle controls, things like that, we're going to leave default. But for the buttons configuration here, we're going to put these to alternate. So soldier buttons here, put these to alternate. That way melee switches up to circle, and slide and crouch prone is R3. Everything else should remain the same. And they're going to do that same for the vehicles here for transport and ground vehicles as well. This will allow you to have the accelerator and the reverse brake on the triggers here instead of with the thumbsticks L and R, which makes it just very difficult if you're going to try and move forward as well as turning and trying to aim at the same time. So alternate brings us more in line with what Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4 veteran controls were on console. So this is kind of more comfortable for me. Aircraft, air pilot buttons here. Again, Air Pilot controls default and Air Pilot buttons on alternate. Now I had these set up for a custom configuration, but I had to remove that just because it was causing some issues. So Air Pilot buttons will leave this or move it to alternate. And again, this is what I said. If you're flying, if you're a helicopter pilot or a jet pilot, this should be more in line with what you're used to from Battlefield 3 and 4. So throttle up and down is going to be L2 and R2, as well as then your yaw and your pitch will be L and R. So that'll just make it a lot easier. It switches up the fire to L1, pinging R1. So the same as Battlefield 4's veteran controls. And then gunner, again, just alternate, very similar. This isn't a huge change, but for driving vehicles, alternate buttons definitely a big help if you're used to playing previous Battlefield games. If you're a beginner, you probably want to leave them at default if you're not used to flying or driving. But if you're more an advanced player and you've been playing Battlefield for a long time, you definitely want the buttons over on alternate. Now for global invert look and controller vibration, these are however you want them. I have some off, some on, so that's not a big deal. It's really personal preference. Now on foot options, so soldier aim sensitivity. This is going to be not your aim down sight or anything, but more so your default turning side to side type sensitivity. I have this set low at 21. This will just, again, bring me more in line in my Battlefield 4 settings where I was used to moving a little bit slower side to side. If I'm moving too quick side to side and then I need to ADS, I find it with me here on console, it definitely can throw off my aim and make it difficult to get on target. So 21 is a good setting here for me right now. And again, you can continue to play with that. Invert vertical look for soldier. So again, we're putting this to off. And then field of view, this is set at 80, which we already set on the other screen. ADS field of view, we're going to leave that or move that to on. This will magnify weapon sights, will be relative to the user-defined field of view. We want that, which we covered in the general or the display options. Soldier aim assist brought this down to 90. Soldier aim weapon assist or zoom snap brought this down to 80, just because the Tactical Brit made a good point. It's a little bit strong, and I think with the right sensitivity options, you really don't need it that high. So I lowered this a little bit. Again, this is personal preference. You can start with it at 100 and bring it down as you see fit. For the movement, soldier sprint, we want as toggle. Double tap 4, these are all default. We'll leave that for off. Sprint button, L3. And again, this is really with the alternate controls. All these are default. For the zoom, we'll leave the soldier weapon zoom on hold there for what we want with L2 here on controller. And then we move down here, soldier zoom aim sensitivity. So this is one that I moved down. I believe this was set at 100, so I moved this all the way down to 70. And this is what really helped me out in my ground engagement. So using mainly like the SCAR, for example, I was really struggling to get on target and stay on target. As I'm trying to adjust, the controller was just, the stick was so sensitive, it was throwing me all over the place. So bringing this down to 70 feels a lot more like Battlefield 4 for me. A lot easier to stay on target and get the kills, even at pretty decent ranges. So definitely play with the soldier aim or zoom aim sensitivity. This is your ADS sensitivity. So that combined with what we have set up here for soldier aim sensitivity just slows down your movement a little bit in case you're not used to that. Makes it a lot easier for me at least to get on target. And then all these other ones I left these at the base, whatever they were at default. However, reload hints, I turn this off. And then down here for advanced, aiming left, right acceleration down to 8. So this will choose the amount of acceleration when pushing the aim controller all the way. This is just kind of, think of it as similar to, you can see here, the value set to 0. If you want aiming with full acceleration as it was in Battlefield 1, then set it to 100. So it's really how quickly you'll be able to move and snap on targets, things like that. I brought this all the way down because I want it more so like Battlefield 4. The lower you go, closer to Battlefield 4, the higher you go, more like Battlefield 1. Vertical aim ratio, put that to 80. And then uniform soldier aiming, put this to on. So you can see here in the description, enable the use of procedural aim rate when in zoom instead of original preset numbers. And again, since we played around with our sensitivity, this will help us a lot more. Coefficient, I believe the default here is 133, so we'll leave that. And then all the zoom magnifications, we'll go ahead and leave those how they are so we don't have different sensitivities per optic. Moving over to vehicles, so the vehicle aim sensitivity, have this at 28. Again, you can definitely adjust this. This will just be, again, same with the soldier aim sensitivity, really your side-to-side movement, not necessarily if you're zoomed in or anything like that. And then invert vertical look for tracked vehicles, we'll keep that on off. Third person field of view, went over this, we'll leave that at 88. tank aim sensitivity. So this is an interesting one. For me personally, the tank aim sensitivity seems a little high, so this is something I may lower. Again, you can adjust your gunner sensitivity and transport vehicle free look. And then here's your zoom, so vehicle weapon zoom. I put this on toggle, so instead of hold, this is toggle. That way I can hit it once if I want that zoom, and then hit it again to zoom out instead of having to hold it. I find if I'm holding it, it kind of throws off my aim because I'm having to hold down one button while also navigating on the sticks. Makes it a little bit more difficult. And now the zoom gunner button and all these, you can actually set custom controls, which we'll look at. I don't have them set anymore, but you can do that. For pilot, invert vertical look for aircraft, leave that to on. And here for aircraft control sensitivity, want that at 70. So this is, I think I lowered this maybe just a little bit, just again, bringing it more in line with kind of the Battlefield 4. I don't want to be, when I'm looking at my targets, especially in the helicopter, I don't want to be bouncing all over as I'm trying to adjust for my rocket pods. Helicopter control assist, we want this on off. If you have this on, this is a pain as a pilot because if you're trying to line up shots, it's going to try and hover you and stabilize your helicopter. It's going to be impossible to hit shots, so leave that on off. And then down here for advanced, so aiming left, right, acceleration, bring this to 20, so you can choose the amount of aim acceleration when pushing the aiming stick all the way. In zoom modes, there is no stick aiming acceleration unless uniform vehicle aiming is on. So we'll put this down to 20. Vehicle aim ratio 80. Same with this one is set and locked to 80. And then uniform vehicle aiming, we want this on. And for coefficient, default 33. And vehicle aim relative controls, we also want this to on. Next up for controller tuning. So controller vibration, this is again personal preference. And then controller left stick, the dead zones here. So the center dead zones, I put these down to 7 for each. You can adjust these from here. The axle dead zone at 0. And then the max input threshold, I left these at 100. So you can see center dead zone are all 7 and the axle dead zone is all 0. And then we'll leave the threshold, input threshold at 100, making it a lot easier. Now, another thing like we said here is if you wanted to customize some of your buttons like fire, and if you want to switch on PlayStation, at least L1, R1 for firing, you can do that here. For on foot, you could go ahead and come down here. You see fire and zoom. You can switch these up, and then you just would need to reset whatever those are, I think. So if I were to set R2 to R1 for fire, I would need to then switch up R2 as my coma rows on foot, and then for zoom, I believe it would be switch up zoom would now be fire for L1, and then in turn L2 would have to be your plus system. So just keep in mind you can do that. However, just be very cautious if you're setting controller mapping. I did this when I was doing my helicopter controls. When you set this, if it's not right, you can obviously tweak it. You can set it back to default, so it's not a huge problem. However, if you're trying to do something like we did here with the controls for the general, for example, I had air pilot controls. I had this on custom mapping, and then I had the buttons on default. So before I wanted to set and play around with the alternate, I customized the mapping. It wasn't right, so I set that back to default. But in turn now, because it was on custom, I could not adjust the buttons. And every time I tried to adjust the controls back to default, should help you out quite a bit. Let me know what you guys think of this, what your controller settings are. If you have something drastically different than mine, let me know. Like I said, the biggest help here was going to be for my soldier aim sensitivity as well as my soldier zoom aim sensitivity. Really helped me out on the ground, and obviously the vehicle button controls over to alternate were a big help as well. And then I think the next step here, I might play around with L1 and R1 as zoom and fire on ground. That would be the next step. I think would also be a good option. So let me know what you guys think down below. If you get in the game tonight, if you've had it for the week, what are your controller options? How are they different from mine? Till next time, this is Buffer Gaming with your controller settings guide for Battlefield 2042. Buffer Gaming, out.